Security Expert series. Today, we are joined by Mr. Prem Kumar, CIO, CISO at EH Technologies Private Limited. Today, we are going to talk about privacy operations. Prem sir, to me, I understand that privacy operations to ensure the adherence of laws like GDPR, CCPA, protecting user rights, right? So, no, even we need to protect the personal data and customers' confidentials. So, to understand this, so what is this fundamentals of privacy operations, sir?
Hi everyone, thanks Vijay. Looking at what are the fundamentals is we'll have to look at what the business really wants to know about what is going and what would the impact be. Finally, when things go are absolutely need to do the right performance, we need to do gap analysis there and to understand and develop a framework based on the gap analysis that. So if you look at gap analysis identifies things that require focus are the privacy notice for any document or a website, the regulatory initiatives that have to be taken care, how the reporting happens, and the policy management also comes into picture, risk and controls, issues and audits, meetings and focus, and government governance routine is are the primary focus areas of the piracy operation fundamentals, Vijay.
Okay, sir. Sir, you mentioned about framework, right? So,
Yeah.
why privacy management framework is must for organizations?
See how when there is a immense data that makes it difficult for the organization to keep track of corporate data, which includes personal and sensitive data, right? Without the need of insights into that data, it becomes challenging for the organizations to assess the data type. Subjected to the regulatory requirement. So what happens is without well established privacy solution, the consequences of not having a framework will lead into a lot of issues, and we don't find we are in the right place of ensuring regulatory and compliance can be fairly significant here. So to add to that, what will happen if you don't have a framework? There could be a financial gain if the framework is not there. It can be a damage, that financial damage can happen there. That is one thing. Financial and legal damages can be more, and it can have large fines which are affecting. Now looking at GDPR, CCPA, and other government bodies that are there in each of the respective countries, about 162 countries have this regulatory and data compliance stuff. So looking at what happens is they have the significance of penalizing up to 72 million dollars is what we see Google and Meta by South Korean watchdogs for tracking using consumer data for targeting advertisement without their consent. So privacy framework is important to see how the consent management is there, what is the framework that is there, how that has to be taken care. This also can bring up reputational losses, okay, adding to that to the errors that we oversee in stuff. So corporations fear a reputational loss as well when they see such issues not having a framework or a set templates. We see that there is reputational loss. Now looking at errors, why you need to have the teams must properly ensure compliance and seamless communication across departments. So these errors, when it is not in a formed way, they should have a breach notification set, a conduct impact assessment, perform vendor risk assessment, and more. So if there is no proper framework which is set, this will lead to lot of manual operation system practices resulting in continuous human errors and oversight. Vijay.
Thank you for that insights. So you mentioned about avoiding. So the framework work is must to avoid financial damages, to prevent no reputational losses, and reducing errors and overseeing all the robustic automation privacy management system, right? So
Yes.
here I would like to understand how we can implement this privacy management. Uh, what is that all about?
So what happens is the privacy has to have incorporate secure policies. Say from a portal standpoint, we'll have to say how we manage their details. What are the notices? What is the compliance that we follow? What are the regulations that are followed for processing data? Is one thing that is called as privacy notice management, which we normally use for putting our website is secure, the data is running on HTTPS, and there is a compliance notice saying that this data is processed by a specific format, and there is transparency and compliant to the privacy notices that the industry norm has to be followed, Vijay. So looking at organizations collaborate with partners within for the portal to set up their notice. Usually they shall create, manage, track different versions of changes of privacy notice. Okay. Privacy approach also uses AI automation. So there is a intelligent automation that is done continuously for scanning data, automatically updated changes, okay, processing, sharing, selling, or retention of data, right? The privacy notice also updates in real time, ensuring the compliance. Okay, that's what we really need. Finally, when you look at privacy notice creation and management is also integrated to links with DSR, the data subject request fulfillment, right? DSR means data service requests, right? Universal consent of data subjects. When we take or collect certain data, we need to see how that is processed, what is that it is processed, and how it is getting processed. So that also becomes notice that gives us the rights to go through accountability, efficiency, use of transparency processes, Vijay.
Thank you. You mentioned about notice management. Could you elaborate about that? What is privacy notice management?
So organizations being immense pressure on not controlling increasing proliferation of data coming. So from the mid-range endpoints, but also keep the data well guarded, right, against unintentional data leaks, cyber threats. Okay.
Mm.
As data moves from physical to on-premises infrastructures and to the virtual data centers across the globe, data leaks are possible through the while it is in transition. Okay, and threats vectors also tend to snowball accordingly. Okay. Apart from this, privacy and protection practices by business further adds concerns to internet users. So how they use, how they log in. Okay, seeing that we have about 40% internal users don't trust that companies use their data ethically. So similarly, 51% of the people feel worried about the data being sold, while 47% fear the possibility of data being hacked. So that's where we see data is not clearly managed. That's when you have these digital threats coming up. So governments have come up with wide strict privacy policies and standards, such as the European General Data Protection Act, that is GDPR, and the
Mm.
California Privacy Rights Act as CPRA, and HIPAA being the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of the United States. Now, with that, even India, Brazil, others have started their own data processing security laws. So, even in India, if you see further to the data that is being collected, will start getting processed and every data that is collected has to seamlessly look at how the data is being processed, what is the data subject, how is that collected, how it is getting processed. Our data which is available freely in the internet at the moment. See, now if you see, our Aadhaar cards details or the PAN card details are collected by the banks, but it is not required, and all the numbers and the validation pointers are openly available for us to get into an issue. So seeing this, government has brought this DP Act, which is predominantly going to look at how data has to be protected, how it comes to taking the management into picture. Organization must create and implement robust privacy management system that should wish the ease of customer concerns, retain trust, and ensure compliance with data privacy laws. So they have to look at how the data has to be processed, how it is collected and stuff. So that's where we have to have a clear privacy management. That's part of the framework that we've been using. So that will be part of the 6-7 processes that we discussed in the first Vijay.
Yeah. So you mentioned about data processing, all this stuff. I understand this is basically the data management, right? So from the organization perspective, how this data management, what is this data management, how this can be managed properly?
Yeah, so privacy management is a framework tool, right, that enables organization to process data, right?
Yeah.
So it strictly approaches that the compliance is being adhered, and the structured data approach has several disciplines in the framework, that is, and policies allow organization to meet regulatory compliances. So to facilitate data management with any organization, they must timely conduct data privacy impact assessments, full privacy rights of individuals, and analyze the records flows, right? So corporate data, now looking at corporate data also can be sold. Now if you have an AD stuff, so the data, yeah, I can pull out the data of the users that are there in from AD, and that also can be one of the data which will have certain confidential information about their PAN cards, their salaries, their designations, whom they are reporting. If that goes out to the public, it may get into trouble, Vijay. So that's where we see that is a problem. So that's how we see we have an issue.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that insights. So I have a question. So you mentioned about it's a government. I believe that if we talk about government, definitely there should be some laws and regulations, right? So,
Yes.
what are the privacy laws and regulations being followed, and know how this is being adhered?
Yeah. Okay. So data privacy landscape has evolved quite exponentially over the past few years,
Mhm.
and now we see about 120 countries have data privacy and protection legislations in place. Reasonably, it is detailed set of provisions to be covered under various regulations that are covered and core pillars of modern data privacy. Okay. Now, if you look at what are the data protection processing policies, now at the privacy framework, there needs to be certain foundation principles keeping framework together, make it transparent, add credibility to it, and ensure organization data processing activities are in accordance with global laws. Now, when we say global laws, we may be processing data which can be from Europe region, we can be seeing it from the US region, now Brazil or India, how the data is getting transferred, those laws have to be, these activities, data process has to be done in accordance to these laws. You have similarities in the way that these laws are being processed, but they should be lawful, there should be fairness in it, and the transparency. The first principle of the organization must ensure data is collected, processed activities in a lawful and transparent way. These two are very, very important for us to have any data being collected and processed. Now, limitations must also, the purpose limitation of the organization, saying that organization must collect and process data only any legitimate, specific or explicit purpose. After that, how that data has to be kept, processed, data minimized, or after a certain period of the data being used, it can be deleted. And you can also give a consent that this is being used for this, and what is that we should. Storage limitations also play a big role here. What is the period that you have to keep the storage, right? That way, when the policy kicks in, it has to cover all the say from collection to processing to storing to use and further retention and deletion. So after the work is done, if it is required for some time of period, the accountability should be from the organization, saying that it should document the process of overall sets from collection to deletion, Vijay. So legally processing is very important. Consent is again a point where you are processing the data accordingly, and when a consent is given for a period of time, you should also give them back a consent saying that this data is processed and the data is getting deleted. So you will have to look at that way. What are the interests that the organization uses for this process of data? That is more important. So that's where we see how data can be, what are the regulations and laws that are implemented.
Yep, thank you for that insights. I think there is a importance of legal basis processing, vital interest, public interest, legitimacy interest, like this.
Yeah.
So I believe that when we approach with these requirements, there should be some privacy assessments requirement, right? So
Yes.
if that exists, how we can approach? Is there any assessments to be done on this?
No, privacy assessments are, see, what we do is, when we have privacy data, so these are called PIIs and DPIIs.
Mhm.
Privacy impact assessments and data process impact assessments are two important parts of the privacy assessments. If the organization develop new product and are about to conduct data processing activity that cause high risk for individual, these assessments enable the organization to evaluate the data practices mechanism, ensuring that users aren't exposed and unwanted security and privacy risk. In further, data breaches contribute to the organization compliance efforts. So what we are saying is a privacy management program must be initiated, okay, which first has to detail record of data collected to identify the exposure and individuals then resolving and mitigating the risk. So how do we do that? Most of them are data subject requests. Now, how data subjects rights or DSRs are it is called data subject rights, not requests.
Mhm.
Most of the data privacy regulations provide many rights of data subjects. Control of personal data, the number of rights given to the user may vary from one legislation to another. Okay. Categories can be, I can categorize any data saying that request for right to request and access for information. That is where I obtain confirmation whether or not to personalized data is being processed, access a copy of this personal data. Now the second point is right to change correct information. If there is inaccurate, it is not right, inaccurate, this one, or incomplete, out of date personal data, we ask the participant or the personal data owner saying that these are things that we have found which is wrong. Can we go ahead and change? That means you can change or correct the information based on the consent that the owner of the data is given. Then right to delete. Once the work is done, it is important that whether we can delete it or how it is, to that consent we take. Then right to object. That is, they have the right to object certain processing of data. They can say this data cannot be processed when they give consent. So that also has to be taken. Now consent is given, but they have the right to withdraw also. So that process is when they have given a consent and they feel certain things are not required and they don't want to, they can withdraw that consent. We should be clear in finding out whether that consent is there or not every time we try to process the data, right? So right to data portability. Now can I port this data once it is used, structured or commonly used or machine readable formats of data from one controller to another. That also you will have to take rights to do such things. Now there are a lot of things like that. We can add object and automate decision. We can have the right to restrict of processing, right to opt out of selling and sharing. These are some of the pointers which data subject and privacy legal processing can look at. Vijay.
Yeah, thank you for that insights. I understand that there are privacy impact assessment and DPIAs. So we commonly come across in a situation like data breaches happened, right? Also, in that scenario, data breach incident response, how we can know as an organization or individual has to respond to this kind of
So,
situations.
looking at organizations, people have to report when there is a breach. Data breaches can provide turning point for organization to the worst if not responded promptly and effectively. This can get into hefty fines, but also cause a loss of customer trust and business reputation. They have to have include breach assessments as part of their regular assessment programs. Breach impact analysis and response systems have to be in place. Okay, data
Mhm.
breach assessments would enable employees to stay aware of risks that lead to data breaches in their role in preventing. So these data breach incident reports have to be told them how an incident can happen. They should have certain uh, assessments and trainings to be done for them to look at how data breaches and the responses are covered over the organization. The impact of analysis and response process enables security teams to discover and identify data sizes that has been breached, that the categories are impacted data and affected individuals. Privacy regulations further require business to keep track of such incidents. So they'll have to look at tracking, monitoring, whether that is closed, whether the regulatory is being informed, authorized authorities have been accordingly informed, applicable with applicable provisions done how to address that. So to bring that, what we a well-established breach impact analysis response system enables teams to identify, remediate, and report breaches, but also prevent further threats. Okay, so teams can drive maximum learning from breaches, identify recurring patterns, discover vulnerabilities, and prepare preventive measures accordingly. Now, every time you cannot have us being, when it is a small organization, to monitor. So we also have to look at having vendors who can look at and help us. So when we bring vendors also, we'll have to look at vendors breach or risk assessment that has to be looked at. So what are the aspects that data privacy laws to gain attraction across the globe in such a short period, right? So the vendor includes risk assessment. Privacy laws such as GDPR requires data to third parties only if the parties can guarantee to implement appropriate technical and operational measures and data protection. Vijay. So you have to have one vendor who can look at 24 bar 7 on the incident response. A system has to be set up and also a regular risk assessment to be done so that the security teams analyze and secure the privacy practice and measures of the vendor. Vijay.
Thank you, Prem, for that insights. So I see the AI is in the trend right now, right? So how this AI can support for privacy management, how whether it is a
So
risk or supporting things.
yeah, good question. So what happens is with the AI coming in, so what the organizations are trying to look at is they have a set of known error databases being implemented for every impact that they have done. So they are trying to see if AI can be used to automate if that is part of the database. So AI is being fed with the known error database, and
Mhm.
if incident happens and if it refers to it and it will say this incident has been reported earlier and this has happened. This is the remediation that we have done, and it also can fix it with the process. Now, an automation process also can be set where this issue can be fixed. But if it is bringing down a system for this to be fixed, then there should be a change management which comes into picture. AI should be in a position to trigger a ticket that is there for the teams to look at and properly plan a downtime, and then implement a system when if it is a production system. Now, if it is a patch update and it can happen without a restart, we can push the patches offline using bots for all the. See what is happening nowadays, everybody is not doing a Windows update automatically, right? So the patches, once Microsoft releases it, it's pushed from the server which is connected to the AD, and these servers get these updates. And a message comes up, there is an update which is there, would you like to update it now or off business hours, is a message which pops up. You click accordingly, and that is how the automation of incident response or patch management is being done for automation of incident and response, Vijay.
Thank you for that insight. So I learned lots of things today. The assessments, how the laws and regulations in privacy, and the framework for the privacy, and how to respond to this data breaches. Thank you for that insights. So, any final word would you like to
So,
add on the privacy operations?
yes, Vijay. The pointer that we would like to look at is privacy is key. Your personal data is not secured if you are not aware of it. It can be breached. It can be used for doing any kind of transaction, whether it is a, if you have an Aadhaar card which is freely available for them, and they can get a SIM card and stuff. So government is putting a lot of regulations in terms of multi-factor authentication and stuff, but still there is a place where they can use your data to look at having certain services enabled which don't need an authentication, re-authentication or an OTP to be done. Now, if I have to give a documentation which is signed and it is not having a data, that privacy, that gives them the authority to do certain work using your verification data. There's a Xerox copy of your Aadhaar card and you signed and there is no date. I can use it at that any time, saying that
Yes.
this is a proof. So privacy of your banking data, your phone numbers, your Aadhaar card details, your PAN card details are very, very personal to it. They are considered as private data for an individual. So keeping them secure and keeping them in control is one thing that you should always keep in mind. When you give the Aadhaar card, this one, your photo and stuff is fine. You can give a Aadhaar card masked card for them to not use it completely. Your phone numbers can be masked and given. So there are certain basic awareness things that has to happen as a privacy part in your data being accessed by others. It is very crucial for us. We have to look at privacy operations to minimize the impact on our financial and our reputation also as a loss that may come into picture, Vijay.
Thank you, sir, for adding the final views. Thank you so much for joining this chapter 4. Thank you, audience, for joining us. Thank you so much. We will meet you in the next chapter. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.